in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio, the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. Well, you have probably heard about life coaches, but you may not have heard of an end-of-life coach. And my guest today is a very special person who helps people to navigate their end of life. Dr. Janet Bieschke brings experience, knowledge, and practical ideas to families seeking guidance and comfort where anxieties, fear, frustration, damaged relationships, and poor communication skills have often tainted the final days for dying people and their families. Janet's engagement brings information, guidance, suggestions, and ease in ways that allow peace, healing, and closure to those approaching death and those who love and care about them. So, Dr. Janet Bieschke, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Thank you, Ralph. I think you've said it all.
Well, it's a very interesting line of work that you are in, and the path that you took to put you in this very unique position of being able to help people in a very, what can be a very difficult and challenging time in their lives. I want to hear more about that, but first tell us a little bit more about who you are and who you help.
Okay, thank you. Well, I can make this very brief and say that I had the opportunity to serve in the Postal Service for 34 years, and as I was leaving that, I decided I wanted to do something where I could give back and do something to alleviate some of the pain and hurt and fear that I was seeing in our world. So our family was grown, my husband was retired, 3 of our 4 parents were gone. And what we were beginning to notice, along with other baby boomers, was that we were losing more friends and more relatives to this thing called death. And being very aware that time was of the essence, both health-wise and just time, I wanted something with purpose. So I did, a little bit of education around getting certified as a life coach, a Reiki master, light body work, hypnotherapist, but the magic came when I became trained and began working as a hospice volunteer. So, to answer your question, I'm a life coach who is often referred to as an end-of-life coach, and I help many people face that impending death of a loved one by showing them how to become what I call a difference maker. I show them how to approach this time with the concept of appreciation during a time when a loved one is dying. And it's sometimes it's just necessary that they learn how they can take some of that scary out of those final days, as you said, for the loved one and for those that are being left behind. Because once you take that scary out, then you're able to focus more on the living. What can I do in this time that's left? You learn how to live differently so that you are creating the moments that matter with the people that matter while you still can.
Excellent. You are the author of a book called I'm Sorry, I Love You, Goodbye, Harvesting the Sacred Gifts of the Final Days. But a very, I would say it's a calling for someone like you to invest themselves into this particular experience, this life experience in helping people at the end of their life. What got you heading in this direction? How did you get started in this?
Well, personally, I always say I think my mother invoked my guardian angels, and they made me do this because I ditched that promise of becoming a nun some 50 years ago. But it helped when the hospice staff quickly realized that they could use my experience in education and skills in other areas. so when they had an opportunity to help a person who was dying ease that pain for a friend of theirs, they asked me whether I would spend the time and write a letter with that patient. Well, one thing led to another, and I brought my video camera in and prepared some interview questions, and soon I had a 90-minute filming of a person that really ended up being their whole life story and a message for those that they were leaving behind, and it hooked me. I found it was interesting, intriguing. I could see the value in those people that would hear this or see the film later, and I knew this was like, wow, this is good stuff. And then I had a friend who had a mother who was dying and asked if I would interview her. Well, actually, she wasn't dying. She was 99 years old and she was in the nursing home. But, we're all dying. It was coming. And so I went and I interviewed her, and same thing, the stories and the history. And it was like, wow, what a legacy. What an opportunity. So I was hooked.
Wow. So it sounds like that you've really got two people or two sides of this situation that you're working with. One is the person who wants to tell their story, who wants to leave their end of life story and communicate their thoughts. And the other is helping families to capture that and to receive that and respond to that. So it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So what would you say is the most common problem or the greatest difficulty that you see when you're trying to help the people that you're helping?
Well, first of all, I think the biggest issue is that we're dealing in a world that is just so fast-paced, and we get distracted easily. And I don't see a lot of people, even in their normal lives, stopping to take the time to connect with another person and really listen to them. We all want to know that we're worthy, that we're lovable, that we're valued. That's part of that loving legacy. And I think that when I listen to the stories, the book came from it, the biggest thing I see, regrets lie at the core of our pain. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry for all the times I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry for disappointing you. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to spend more time in your life. I'm sorry for ignoring you, whatever that might be. I'm sorry for not knowing you the way I could have. So, yes, all of that comes out. And it's safe to say that every person I've ever interviewed had mentioned their regrets. And regrets that haven't been released, they hold that mystifying power, and most issues were related to relationships. And as parents, the way they parented was the usual area holding remorse. There should have been more time here or with that particular child, or that particular child seemed to catch more wrath or discipline than was necessary. There should have been time, less time bringing work home into the family life. There should have been better appreciation towards a spouse or partner.
Yeah,
and
a lot of coulda, shoulda, and would have, right?
Yes, and I have a wonderful, I call her my wisdom spiritual teacher, who said, don't allow other people to should on you. And I love that, or even ourselves, stop it. We can get there really time. So, we have lessons to learn, and sometimes we need to figure out how to forgive ourselves in the process. And not everyone is able to do that during their life. So for many people, it's just something that they want to do before they leave this world. And knowing that death is coming can be a time of life review, life evaluation. We look where we did good and where we failed. That's kind of where we go. And you might find that you're with a parent who also, they need to find closure with some of their old unresolved hurts, misunderstandings, stories. So this really becomes a time of opportunity. It's a time for healing. It's a time for peace and for restoring love.
Isn't it kind of sad that we have to wait till the end of life before we begin to open up and communicate? Is that Why is that? Why do we wait until the last minute and then try to set things right? Is that just a human condition, or what do you think?
You tell me. It could be. I think there's that part of us that thinks we will always have time. That we just can't bear the thought of losing somebody that is so important to us, and we tend to just not go there. That's part of our survival, maybe. I've seen it in many ways where it comes forward, where the stories are different when somebody has gotten the news and they've had time to sit with that. And I think when we really do that, it changes the way we live. It changes the opportunities that we say, you know what, I have today. What can I do today? How can I be a contribution today? What can I do that will make my life or those lives of the people around me somehow easier, better, less pain, more joy? We all die many deaths. We die when we're not seen. A part of us dies when our voice is not heard and it feels like no one's listening or that our words don't matter to another. A part of us dies when we're not treated as though we are lovable or worthy. So when we find our value in our voice, we learn to stand in that and we take action from a place of joy, respect, love. It shows, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I really like that. From the perspective of someone who has a loved one, and maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a relative who is coming to that time. What can they begin to do right now to begin to start this healing process?
Well, first of all, my average hospice patient is mid-40s to mid-60s. So if you're waiting for them to get to be 80, 90, wake up. We're not guaranteed that. And I've seen it so many times where I've got somebody and they've got a really, really, really good reason for living, and yet life doesn't give them that opportunity. So it comes down to notice, become aware. If it's a parent where you're starting to see changes, pay attention to their health, their financial dealings, the way they either engage or avoid other people. Where are they losing weight physically? Is there something? Are they withdrawing? Are they noticing their grooming habits change? Those daily activities that can change slowly over a period of time, or they can change overnight. Notice the emotions, because a lot of times you'll notice there's a sadness, there's a anger, there's that anxiety, disappointments. Some of that stuff, those regrets show up in ways that just come out in unfiltered emotions. So figure out how to connect with them and become more involved where possible. Get to know them, ask for their stories. If you see more of the blame, the outbursts of crying, they're assigning guilt, or maybe you sense your own desire to just want to stay out of the drama. Avoidance is common. It doesn't resolve the issues, but for some, it's the only way they found to survive some of the drama and the pain. And then engage. It's that notice, connect, engage. Share the responsibilities. When you get to that point and you know that there's more work to be done here, it's not a time to do it alone. Help is available. Your attitude is so key in this. You can make a difference even when the past has been full of what I call stuff with an uppercase S.
Yeah. You mentioned avoidance and how common avoidance is, and it kind of kicking it down the road and not wanting to deal with it. But what you're saying is that at some point we've got to deal with it. We're either going to deal with it when we have time, or we're going to have even more regret if we wait too long, right?
Well, and those regrets show up sometimes in our behavior. Sometimes it takes someone else to point it out to us that, you're acting just like your parent did to you. The things you hated, you're now doing that to a child.
Yeah.
And some of those subconscious things they carry, we've been traditionalized, we've been conditioned. When we get angry or frustrated, those are the things that come out, and it's what we know, it's what we're common, we're able to draw from And whether it's discipline or the way we express our love or don't, the way we communicate, whether we look for what's working or what's not working. Some of us we don't want to be a victim, but yet we find it easy to fall into that role in the poor me. And it's easy to go there. So sometimes you need somebody else to help you recognize that you are going there, and is that what you want? What do I want? What does that look like? What would that feel like?
Yeah, that's a good point. And most people have not gone through this. If they did go through it, it probably was not a very positive experience. And so the message I think we need to get out is that you don't have to go it alone. And you, Dr. Bieschke, are someone who is very well qualified, highly educated, and all kinds of certifications. You have trained your whole life to be able to help people for such a time as this. How would working with a professional like you really improve the chances of this being a positive end-of-life experience as opposed to a negative?
Well, mindset is huge. One of the things I offer is how to shift those emotions and to guide my clients to create that workable plan. Because just simply listening when they're telling me, what's going on, I can recognize those hopes and desires, and I look at, what can be done in the time remaining. For some, it's a couple of weeks. For others, it's who knows, a lot of time. But there's barriers, there's obstacles that must be released, and that's where the shame, the guilt, those old stories, the things we tell ourselves or we've been told, those fears, those things come up, and they really do need to be released. So by deciding and choosing those emotional outcomes that you desire, you would be amazed at how quickly things can fall into place. And I used to be surprised, but now I just expect the miracles to happen, and happen they do. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me with such beautiful stories of love with tears flowing, and they're thanking me or hugging me or offering me so much gratitude for how they were able to create such peace that they never thought possible. It comes for the parent, the person involved, and even the siblings, when they come back. And it all starts because I can see, and I do see the possible. I hold that space until my client feels that these miracles can actually be achieved. Because sometimes we can't see it alone. And so I can make suggestions knowing that time will bring the gifts of love, forgiveness, and anything else that's needed. Because once they see those possibilities, they are free to create them. And I don't know if I told you about the father with the little baby. Here's a guy who briefly was in his mid-60s. He was in hospice, but he had a little boy who was 6 months old. And it's like, oh my, his only child. And it's like, well, when I found out the whole story, this particular client would have been incarcerated had he not been in hospice, because he had made some pretty rough choices earlier in life, and it ended up in somebody, buying drugs from him and overdosing and dying. And, there were some things that we would not be proud to say, this is my dad. Yeah. And so when I had the opportunity to interview him, I was able to have the baby's mama bring the little guy, to the room and sat him in his father's lap. And that was how I interviewed him. This little guy is cooing, and it was an opportunity where he then started talking about his own grandparents, because I usually start with, go back to your earliest memory, parents, grandparents, tell me about that. And he started talking about how his ancestors, his parents, his grandparents, they came from this strong, solid background and many good choices. So in his words, even though I made bad choices, you come from a long line of good stuff. You can make a good life for you. And I like to think that through those stories captured that day, this father was able to have that hope and that belief that someday his son, in addition to all the other garbage that he may hear about his dad, he would also know and see in his father's words how he was loved, he was held, he was cuddled in his daddy's arms, and he could hear those words of hope and expectation. And maybe just somehow by bridging that time, it would be enough to outweigh some of those other stories passed along. And it would hold enough love to make a difference in this next life. I at least like to think so. Mm-hmm. And I know it was huge for him because the nurses said, oh my gosh, that's all he talked about. So that's kind of an example of why I do what I do, because I get the reward of seeing these gifts of the heart. I get to see how you can bless that space between two people who each hold that loving and hurting part of the other. And hopefully it brings these gifts of peace and love and healing and forgiveness, and it brings closure to them. Because when hearts are left broken, that pain can continue to spread and impact others. And this would have been a perfect example. It was at least a way to balance out some of what that little guy might have heard about his daddy, and he'd say, but there's more to that story.
Yeah. And there's always more to the story than what we've been led to believe, isn't there?
Always.
Yeah. What are you working on right now that's got you really excited that maybe you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, you started by sharing the fact that my book was recently published. So the I'm sorry, I love you, goodbye, those are things I hear on a regular basis. So I've been doing a little more speaking and presentations and workshops. And, it really comes back to when I hear the regrets. I only wished I'd known about you while my mom or my dad was still alive. Or they come back, where can I buy your book? Well, at least now I can say you can buy it on Amazon or Kindle, because at that point I had no book to sell, and they were like, oh, you need to write one. Yeah. And so I was able to take some of those lessons that I've learned and how to start the conversations, even the difficult ones, and put some stories in the book, things that have impacted me. And I really wanted to write it so it was easy to read. This is just a simple, not a reference book, not a how-to, but hopefully to open up some doors and say, you know what, you can do this. If you've got a video camera on your phone, if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, if you're willing to ask for some stories, you might surprise yourself. And that's really what I'm doing, is trying to get this message out and to show that there are ways to take some of the pain and that scary out of those final days and turn that into a celebration of life while you're still alive. How nice is that to say, I put some tools in the books, letters for later and notes for now. And the notes for now are such a beautiful way to bring a family together and almost have like that celebration like you would with a birthday party. The balloons, the music, all of these notes that you've gone out and collected from family members or maybe old classmates or neighbors, and they get to fill that in and send it in and maybe bring those people together in the room and let them read what I valued about you, what I learned from you, what I remember about you to the person who's about to die. And notice how different, how fun, how connecting that can be. And all of a sudden you're learning about your loved one in ways you didn't know. And that, instead of standing around saying, well, what is the doctor saying? How much time does he have or she have left? You're doing something that's fun and engaging and bringing laughter. And you're saying, okay, Mom, who do you think wrote this? And you're sharing something that was a feedback from somebody that was earlier in their life. Or I didn't know they did that. Really? They hopped trains? They did what? I mean, because you don't always see somebody who's in their 50s, 60s, and 70s as somebody who used to be in their 15, 16, and 17-year-old.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, those are some very powerful tools and powerful ideas. How can our listeners get in touch with you to find out more about your book and about your services?
Well, through the book, obviously. I'm Sorry, I Love You, Goodbye, Harvesting the Sacred Gifts of the Final Days. That is on Amazon, Kindle, and most of the places where you can buy books today. But also through my website, www.drjanetb.com. So that's DRJANET, as in Bieschke.com.
Wonderful. Well, this has been very inspiring, and I think the lesson I take away from it is don't wait until the last minute, because not everyone has advance notice of their death. As you said, we're not guaranteed a today or tomorrow, And we just don't know what tomorrow may hold. So my encouragement to our listeners is to make amends, to connect, to not wait until the last minute, because you may not have notice at the last minute. But if you do, this book is really a good resource to help you. I'm Sorry, I Love You, Goodbye, Harvesting the Sacred Gifts of the Final Days. Dr. Bieschke, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. Any final thoughts or more words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners as we close?
Well, this came from a 92-year-old lady who was in hospice, and somebody had asked her, what does it feel like to know that you're dying? And I love her spunk when she said, let me ask you, what does it feel like to be pretending that you're not? So consider yourself on advance note. Isn't that beautiful?
Wow. Yeah. Man. That's powerful.
I just, you look for the humor, you find the joy in each and every day. You learn to forgive yourself a little bit easier. You recognize that connections to other people are huge. And what if we could make those final days easier, actually joyful? I mean, we've been taught, the story has been, it's difficult, but it's not in every culture. Sometimes if we say, okay, take away some of these rituals or stories, and what could we do? How could we make this better? What might be easier? If I've got a day left, do I want to lay it in a hospital bed feeling sorry for myself, having people mope around me, or do I want them to come to me and say, you know what? Okay, party's on. Where can we, let's enjoy these final moments, days, weeks, months, or in our case, hopefully, maybe years. But make it matter. Take the time to create the moments that matter with the people that matter while you still can.
Words of wisdom from Dr. Janet Bieschke. She is an author, a speaker, and an end-of-life coach who brings her experience, knowledge, and practical ideas to families seeking guidance and comfort. She helps to bring closure to those approaching death and those who love and care about them. You can find out more about her work and also find out more about her book, I'm Sorry, I Love You, Goodbye, Harvesting the Sacred Gifts of the Final Days, by going to drjanetb.com. That's DRJanetB.com, and we'll have that on the website as well. Dr. Bieschke, it's been a real pleasure to have you on Rebelpreneur Radio today. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us.
Thank you. I appreciated your time and that of your listeners.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.